I review the Belkin Ultimate Keyboard Case. As someone who relegated the full-size iPad to the back burner after the iPad mini launch, it's admittedly a bit awkward to pull this thing back out, but the folks at Belkin have a new product for me to try, and it looks cool enough to convince me to dust off my iPad 3. Now this is, of course, the Belkin Ultimate Keyboard Case. You have all your little slots here for the ports on your iPad and for the buttons and things of that nature. Notice the surface. You have this aluminum-inspired material. You have faux leather on the back here. You have plastic that's soft. You have hard plastic, and even inside the case you have like a velvet material to protect your iPad. So there are a lot of materials here, and that's kind of probably my biggest complaint with this device. It's not that any of the materials are necessarily bad, it just feels a little Frankensteinish. But despite my grievances, if you will, with the build quality of this case, this is a perfect example of the sum of the parts being greater than the individual pieces, because Belkin somehow makes all this come together and makes it work very well. And you have this little lip here to open up your keyboard case, and you can see the iPad 3 inside. And there is the keyboard case. You notice the fingerprint magnet plastic there, the shiny plastic. So that's another thing you're going to have to keep in mind. This thing is a fingerprint magnet. Now, the nice thing about the Belkin Ultimate Keyboard Case is that it is just that, a case. It's not just a cover, so it's going to protect all areas of your iPad, the front, the back. You have that nice velvet material like I was talking about earlier to protect the back of your iPad. Your iPad just snaps into the case, and that little velvet patch of material there acts like a pivot, so you have a nice range of motion with your iPad. You see those 3 little magnet strips there. Those are used to connect to the iPad portion of the case to give you 3 different viewing angles, and that's really actually pretty ingenious. Now, I know some may make fun of that and say, "Whoa, 3 different viewing angles, big deal." But if you're buying this case, then chances are you're a pretty serious typer. And if you're a pretty serious typer, then you know the benefit of having the multiple viewing angles there. Perhaps you're riding on an airplane, or maybe you're sitting at a table that's small or a table that's large. I mean, there's so many different factors where the viewing angles can come into play. It's probably not a great idea to underestimate this feature. It's a big feature of the case. And the nice thing is that you can easily switch between the different angles just by pulling up your iPad and remounting it on the magnet. Super simple, super easy. Now, something that's conspicuously missing from the Ultimate Keyboard Case is an on-off switch for the Bluetooth keyboard. That's right, there is no on-off switch. That's because the device is able to detect when it's mounted on one of the magnets and will instantly turn the keyboard on or off when necessary. Now, when you do need to charge the case, there is a little USB micro port right here for charging, but this feature is nice. The automatic on-off makes the typing experience just a seamless one. You just mount it and start typing. Now, speaking of typing, let's focus a little bit on the keyboard quality, because of course everything about a keyboard case should play second fiddle to the star of the show, the keyboard. And I am happy to report that Belkin's keyboard is one of the best keyboards I've used on any keyboard case thus far. There's plenty of key travel, which is hard to obtain in such a relatively thin package as the Ultimate Keyboard Case. The keyboard's keys, while not as large as the keys on my 15-inch MacBook Pro, are similar in size. There's even a row full of shortcut buttons designed specifically with the iPad in mind, which is obviously a nice thing to have on an iPad keyboard case. And I also find that the presence of the 3 different viewing angles goes a long way. I even found that the case was suitable for typing on my lap, but that's only when I use the angle associated with the magnet nearest the keyboard's keys. With lap usage, the wider angles make the magnet susceptible to failing due to the weight of the iPad mixed with the lack of stability on the lap. But what about those times where you just don't feel like typing? Do you have to take the iPad out of the case in order to just hold it? Well, no. That's where that little handy velvet strip comes in. You can actually fold your iPad and hold it in hand while it's still within the confines of the Ultimate Keyboard Case. Now, one last thing I'd like to draw your attention to is something that Belkin calls sound flow. This basically means that Belkin has designed the case to have a lip near the iPad's rear-mounted speaker grill. Now, this lip seeks to port the audio from the speaker into the general direction of the user. And I have to say, it makes a big difference if you're big on audio. It works great with movies, gets the sound right to the user instead of going backwards away from the user. Nice feature, Belkin. So what's the bottom line? Well, if you're a serious typer with a full-size iPad, then I believe you'll be happy with the Ultimate Keyboard Case. True, the design is a bit unique, for the lack of a better word, but it's a design that's obviously been through a lot of testing in Belkin's labs, and frankly, it works. It's probably not the thinnest package though. Notice this shot here of the Retina MacBook Pro 15-inch in a case next to the iPad in the Ultimate Keyboard case. Yeah, it's pretty thick, but that's because it's an all-out case, meaning that both the front and the rear portions of the iPad are protected from scuffs, scratches, and drops. Now, with that all being said, if weight or form factor is one of your primary deciding factors, then you'll likely want to look in another direction. Although all of the previously mentioned factors are important, the bottom line is that a keyboard case is worthless without a good keyboard. After using this case for nearly a month, I can attest to the fact that Belkin's keyboard doesn't mess around in this area. It's a solid Bluetooth keyboard for the iPad. It features battery life that only required me to charge the device once during my entire month-long usage period. This is a keyboard case that's always ready to go to work for you. Just open it up and start typing. If being productive on your iPad requires that you have a keyboard, then you should definitely consider buying the Ultimate Keyboard case for the iPad.